Miami Dolphins Q&A is this edition of Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am your host, Nic Rohloff. As we are 1 week away from the NFL Draft, I wanted to answer the questions from Dolphins fans on the draft, trade rumors, and everything in between. We'll start with my guy, Frank O'Connor, who sent a $20 super chat on our live show, asking, would it be possible to trade Jalen Ramsey in our second or third round pick to get up into a first-round selection to take a better guard or defensive tackle in the first round? Okay, so it's interesting that you asked this question because looking at the trade value chart, let's just say the Dolphins want to trade up to the 28th pick. The value of that pick is labeled at $660. The second-round pick for Miami is $420. We have talked about Ramsey's value being about a fourth-round pick. Let's just say it's an early fourth-round pick. That puts it at $74. So if Miami wanted to add Ramsey to their second-round pick, which is, by the way, the Lions was a team I picked purposefully because they could be using a quarter, that would move the value up to about $500. So you'd have to find, technically, about 160 value points to trade Detroit to move back up into the first round. Now, that could be a free 2026 third-round pick. That could be your third-round pick. But if you wanted to trade back up into the first round, because those picks are so much more valued, you would probably have to offer your second-round pick, Jalen Ramsey, and your third-round pick to move up, let's say, from 48 to 28. So you're adding Ramsey in a third to 48 to get a first-round pick, or you trade a future third-round pick. Either way, in principle, it's a good idea. But with the Dolphins having such of a need at different positions like safety, O-line, defensive line, corner, I think it would be smart to trade Jalen Ramsey after the draft to a team for a 2026 pick, and then just use your first 3 picks in the top 100 to go corner and trenches in any other order you want. So to me, it's possible. Do I want to do it? No, especially when you factor in the cap hit for Ramsey would jump up from 16.6 to about $27 million in 2025. All right. Make sure you do follow me over on Twitter/X, though, Nic_Rohloff. If you did not get featured on this mailbag, you could always ask me questions over on Twitter, either in my replies or my DMs. They are open. But I will also have you covered on all Dolphins news prior to making a video. So if Jalen Ramsey gets traded, well, we'll actually let you know about that on Twitter before we make a video on YouTube. So follow me over there now. All right, my guy Aaron Prince with a question here. Is it possible to trade Channing Tindall for a third or fourth round pick this year, then trade Ramsey to same team after a first-round pick for a 7th next year? Okay, so 2 things here. I don't know if you got your players mixed up, but Channing Tindall is nothing close to worth a third or fourth-round pick, and Jalen Ramsey, it's much more valuable than a 7th-round pick. If I had to project the value on these 2 players to trade them, I would ironically flip them. I would think Tindall is worth a 7th. Yes, he was a third-round pick, top 100 guy a couple drafts ago, but he has just been so non-existent in the NFL for Miami. I don't think anyone would trade for him for a 7th, considering he's probably going to get cut this year. Maybe he's that 5th linebacker, but I could see him getting cut. And with Ramsey, if you trade Jalen Ramsey this year, I think you need to get a third, considering the fact that you are taking on such a larger dead cap hit, and it cripples you financially a little bit in free agency if you trade him. So I'm going to require a third-round pick, maybe even a second-round pick, to trade Ramsey in the next 7 days. But if you trade Ramsey post-June 1st, then I think his value would be like a conditional 4th-round pick, a 2026 4th that could rise to a 3rd if Ramsey is like an all-pro or a Pro Bowler. So that's where I think the value lies with those 2 individual players. My guy, Jonathan Soto, with a question. Does Miami still go corner and guard in free agency, even if they draft those positions in the first 2 rounds? Corner, yes. Guard, no. So I'll answer corner first. If you took Will Johnson at 13th overall, I think you should still try to sign one in free agency. Assuming you trade Jalen Ramsey, I do not trust a cornerback room of, say, let's just say Will Johnson / Jahdae Barron, Cam Smith, Storm Duck, Ethan Bonner, Artie Burns, and Kader Kohu. That's not a good unit. But if you go Will Johnson / Jahdae Barron alongside Asante Samuel Jr., Rasul Douglas, Stephon Gilmore, and then you have Kohu in your nickel with Bonner, Smith, Duck being your depth pieces. Okay, then I'm fine with that. But if you did draft a guard in the first 2 picks, then I don't think you need to sign one, because then ideally you have Paul at left tackle, draft pick at left guard, center Aaron Brewer, Daniels at right guard, Austin Jackson at right tackle with Larry Borum as your swing, Andrew Meyer depth interior, Leon Eichenberg on the bench as a depth piece. And those are your 8 offensive linemen. So if they draft an offensive lineman in the top 50 to play guard, I do not think they sign one. But if they sign a corner, I think they should still sign a corner if they draft one at 13 or 48. All right, let me know. No, I know a lot of people are going to want to answer Will Johnson in the comment section, but maybe you guys want to switch it up, maybe not. Just let me know who you want the Dolphins to draft with the 13th overall pick. Get down in the comment section and let me know. All right, yes, I agree with a question. Any players you've seen mocked to the Dolphins recently that you're not on board with, whether it be a reach or not a scheme fit? So I think crapshoots are going to happen in the 4th and 5th round. So I'll focus on the mock drafts that I've seen in the first 3 rounds. And the ones that come to mind really aren't crazy. So in the last couple ESPN mock drafts, they've had Jahdae Barron / Will Johnson go at 13, and then Darius Alexander at 48, and Charles Grant at 98, which I think all 3 of those guys and 4 of those guys fit. I've seen Jeremiah go with Nick Emenwari at the Dolphins at 13. I think that would be a fit, but I do think Emenwari is a reach. Now, in our Chat Sports mock draft we did live on Thursday, Emenwari went 15th overall to the Falcons, but I do not think it is worth the Dolphins taking him at 13. If the Dolphins were to draft a safety that high, I would rather go Malachi Starks. But I will say a player I haven't seen mocked to Miami in a while, and that's a good thing, is Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, because I do not want Tyler Booker whatsoever. I do not think he is good. Well, let me rephrase. I think he is good, but he is a horrific fit in the Dolphins scheme because he's a physical, mauler guard, not an athletic, swift, versatile guy, and that is required. I don't think he would fit in a zone run scheme, especially a wide one that Miami runs. So Tyler Booker is a player that is borderline off my board for the Dolphins because I think he'd be a horrible fit. All right, make sure you are subscribed and make sure you have your notifications turned on because we will be live for all 7 rounds of the NFL Draft. We'll be live on Thursday. We'll be live on Friday. We'll be live on Saturday, breaking down every selection Miami makes. They've got 10 picks in total throughout the 7 rounds. So make sure you subscribe and join us for those those streams because it'll be a lot of fun. All right, moving on to a different question. Dad Dean here. When do you think Jalen Ramsey will be traded? I think there's 2 options here. I think it will be on draft night or it will be after the draft. I don't think one gets done between now and Thursday night. Reason? Well, it's because of the cap situation, right? The Dolphins, I don't think, are going to be willy-nilly to trade Ramsey for a pick unless it's a 2nd or early 3rd round pick in this draft because of that money situation, because their cap hit on Ramsey increases by $12 million, which basically takes away their ability to sign anybody in NFL free agency after the NFL draft. And I don't think Miami is interested in doing that at all. But if someone came in with a crazy good offer before the draft or on draft night, I'd say day 2 probably, like a late 2nd round or an early 3rd rounder, well, then Chris Grier and company might have to think about it. But I think it's more likely Miami waits till after the draft and processes the trade after June 1st so they don't have that crazy $12.5 million upcharge on Ramsey's cap hit, and they remain flexible in terms of their ability to sign a guard, safety, or trenchman in free agency after the NFL draft. But I also think teams outside of Miami would want to wait because they'll see how the draft unfolds, and if a team that needs a corner doesn't get a corner that they like and the board falls a specific way where they go in different positions, well, maybe they're like, all right, we'll spin the block and trade for Jalen Ramsey. So I do think a draft trade is the most likely if one happens before June 1st, but I would give it a 65% chance that the trade happens after the NFL draft. More questions to be answered here, but we do have to tell you about our sponsor and official ticketing partner of Dolphins Today. That is Game Time. Game Time is the best way to get tickets, whether you're going to an NBA playoff game or a different event. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA playoff tickets. Last-minute deals save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, and more. You get a full panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're sitting. They also have the lowest price guaranteed. If you find a ticket on a different app or service that's cheaper in the same exact section, row, seat, whole thing, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, building things up with a question. What's up, my guy? Who do you think has potential to be needle-moving signings after the NFL draft? That's a great question. So we actually talked about this on a show Thursday morning. If you watched it, shout out to y'all. If you didn't, go watch it. It's still on the channel. I look at three positions. The biggest positions of need: corner, D-line, safety, offensive line. Well, the problem is that there's no defensive linemen in free agency that are very good, in my opinion. So I'll cross out that position, which is why I think you have to draft one relatively early or get a starting caliber player in the first 100 picks. But there are needle-moving signings at left guard and corner. I mean, Stephon Gilmore, Asante Samuel Jr. If you signed him, drafted Will Johnson, and your cornerback room is Asante Samuel Jr., Will Johnson, with Cam Smith, Ethan Bonner, Storm Duck as backups with Kader Kohu and the nickel, like that's a good corner room. I would actually feel relatively good about that corner room entering next season. I also think Brandon Scherf, if you didn't address offensive line in the draft, you go with that veteran at left guard, I'd feel like that's low-key a needle mover. Now, if you're talking about needle-moving signings that ultimately relates and gives you a championship or multiple playoff wins, no, I don't think any of those guys do that. But they make you a team that is projected to go under 8.5 wins this season to a team that will be fighting for a playoff spot if you grab an Asante Samuel Jr. or a Brandon Scherf. All right, let's move over to Taz C-Mac here. What positions are we going cheap on? And do you agree on the idea of going cheap on that position? It's actually a great question. And the answer, there's two positions that are abundantly clear: safety and tight end. Now, the tight end position I'm actually fine with because you have Jonnu Smith. You were lucky to get him on a cheap contract last year. You have Julian Hill on a cheap deal. You have Pharaoh Brown on a cheap deal. I don't think that's a bad tight end room, though. I think it's a fine tight end room. The other position that's going really cheap is safety. That's without a question. You have Fatu Melifonwu signed a one-year, $4 million deal in free agency. Ashton Davis signed a one-year, $2.5 million deal. Elijah Campbell came back on a one-year, basically minimum deal. And you have a sixth-round pick, Patrick Morris, returning from last year's draft. So the total four safeties there don't even cost you more than $8.5 million. So that is a very cheap safety room. Do I agree with it? No, I don't actually. I like Melifonwu. I'm a little bit optimistic on Davis. But I think it would be serving Miami well to go with another safety, whether they sign Justin Simmons, sign Julian Blackmon, which I would do, or they draft a safety in the first 3 rounds. It's very interesting to see what Chris Grier does, but there's a clear, cheap direction at terms of safety for the Dolphins. We'll see at other positions because it's possible we go cheap there too. All right, what's your confidence level in Chris Grier? Scale 1 to 10. I imagine the number might be low in the chat, to be honest, but I want to know what the people are thinking. Based off what I've seen over the last decade and what I've seen this offseason, I go 3.2. Not very high. He's hit on some picks in the first round. I go 3.2. Maybe that's a little bit low. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Every Noodle with a question. Waffles or pancakes? Ooh, I know you have a real question coming up next, but that's a tough one. We'll take an intermission. I'll go pancakes. Justin, I want to include you on the show today. Waffles or pancakes?
Pancakes every day.
So Dolphins Today agrees with pancakes. Tough call, though. All right, we'll move over to Jackson Slater as your second fourth-round pick. End of the fourth round. Jackson Slater, the offensive guard from Sacramento State. I don't hate him. There's upside there. He's got good athleticism, which makes him a fit in the Dolphins scheme. Now, I do think most projections would say he's a mid to late day 3 pick, so either late 5th round, 6th round, 7th round type of guy. I would be intrigued on taking the gamble with Slater. It's not really a gamble, it's a late pick. I guess a dart throw, you should say. With him maybe in the late 5th round pick, your second 5th rounder, or one of your 3 7th. I think 4th rounders are a little bit more rich. I think you could get like impactful players in the 4th round. To me, Slater would be a developmental guy, which is why I would probably wait to see if you get him on the later day 3 picks in the 7th or 5th round. Barry B with a question here. Who are the smartest draft picks that you think will be able to pick up this complex system and run with it? Okay, I will say this, Barry B. It's a great question. It is. The complex system that Miami has, I think it's complex on each side. I do. It's more complex on offense. And we're not really drafting offense high, right? Like, we have every position set offensively other than left guard. We have our running backs, we have our quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and we have 4 out of 5 starting spots on the offensive line filled. Now, the defense, although Anthony Weaver likes to mix things up, a safe pick to me would be Malachi Starks from Georgia. I also think a safe pick would be Will Johnson if you're looking in the 1st round, because I think Will Johnson is a very smart player that fits in a potential man scheme. It's a little more nerve-wracking if you run more man than zone. He's a better zone guy for sure due to his lack in speed. But I think you'd be able to pick up this Dolphins system. I think Malachi Starks, the versatility with him is endless. So I like him a lot. I'm thinking of 2nd-round guys that would pick up the scheme. Listen, these guys are smart players, man. And I think that's the most common misconception about NFL guys. These guys are really damn smart, and they understand the game of football individually better than we ever will as fans and as analysts, as insiders, if we're going to be honest. So I think that is not really a concern for me with any prospect, because I think if they're going to try to be good in the NFL, they'll be able to pick it up relatively easy. That's my 2 cents on the matter. All right, unfortunately, that will conclude our Q&A. A lot of questions, long video here. If you did not get featured on the on the Q&A, apologize. You have to be there for our live show on Thursday. If you weren't, you could always ask questions on Instagram. Dolphins Today IG is our handle. And also, like I said off the top, at my Twitter, Nic_Rohloff. We have other content on Miami outside of our YouTube shows on our 2 social media pages as well. So if you want more around the Dolphins, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And don't be afraid to hit me up and ask me a question. See you next Thursday for the NFL Draft.